Because the politics that matters to me is somehow not good enough, and is almost on the verge of being criminalized. And I'll give you an example. When the Tamils, during the massacre that was taking place towards the end of the so-called, conflict in Sri Lanka, when the Tamils were being massacred, and they were walking down the Gardner, my God, our concern on radio and etc. was not, oh my God, how marvelous, the Tamils are being political. It was like, hell, I can't get to work on time. What is wrong with you guys? You leave your politics at the door. It's an inconvenience for me that you are blocking the Gardner. It was an inconvenience. When they were standing and marching down University Ave, people were not concerned about, let me find out why 30,000 Tamils would show up and talk about what's political to them. No. Suddenly they become immigrants. They're not Canadians anymore. Suddenly this was not Canada's concern, it was their concern. And your irritation to me, I can't get to my second cup in my Starbucks anymore. What will happen to my latte? I mean, yeah, that's true. Heaven forbid that somebody's family is being slaughtered. I mean, we've got to have the chai latte. You know what? Ironically, of all the people in the world, for a minute I had to do a double take. I actually heard Dalton McGuinty say that we should not be concerned about the fact that Tamils are too political and that they have created an inconvenience for us, because it's not a Tamil issue, it's a Canadian issue. Tamils are Canadians who have family back home, and if something is happening to their family, it is our concern almost as much as it is their concern. To my mind, that's the political discourse I never see. I never hear that. Because that's where political participation will come. When what is important to me, because it's so compelling, I'm only here as an individual, as an immigrant, but my family, my history, my connection is still there, and it's very alive and it's very compelling. And if that is not important to the political process over here, like how the hell can the government of Canada make policies about Afghanistan when it has an impact on on Pakistan, and my mother lives there? You know, as a Canadian, that foreign policy of my country, Canada, should take into consideration what is important to me as much as what is important to somebody else. You see what I'm saying? When we think of a political discourse in Canada, somehow immigrants and refugees are told, your issues are your issues, and now you must participate in Canadian issues. So which part of me would you like to cut off? Which part of me is Canadian and which part of me is Pakistani? That's what I want to know. Where does an immigrant or a refugee make that schizophrenic shift in their body and in their mind? Because political participation, there is aplenty. It's just that what is important to me is not part of the political discourse. And if it were, it would suddenly change my reality. It would change the fact that I actually feel compelled to participate. And it goes from the sublime to the ridiculous. If my garbage is not picked up, that is a problem. But if my mother is if my mother is living in a country where bombs are flying because of what our country may be doing in neighboring countries, I don't know, maybe garbage was not my #1 priority that day. You see what I'm saying? It's how people negotiate their reality. If I had no other compelling issue in my life, then the one that is immediate would take precedence. But when you're an immigrant and a refugee and you're going through the kind of socioeconomic and political marginality that I'm referring to, then your immediate concern is maybe a job, maybe getting a safe and adequate housing, maybe a decent a neighborhood to live in so my children can go to school safely. Maybe the fact that I'm working 2, 3 jobs and I'm having to ignore my children is not going to have a negative impact on their future. Maybe my children don't have to face racism alone in society, that we can actually do something about it when children are being racialized in schools. Those things, when my kids, like after 9/11, I had to worry about the fact that my kid was old every time we went to play basketball. Police used to stop by all the time. This should not be a concern to me. If it is a concern to me, what do? I feel so politically enfranchised and I feel so strong that I will go to what? Where will I go? To complain. Do you really think that when you're being economically, socially, politically, and racially marginalized, that you feel strong enough to walk into a police station and make a complaint about the police to the police? You really think that? You really think that? It doesn't happen, man. It just doesn't happen. And those are the kinds of day-to-day issues, and those are the kinds of realities that get in the way of people being able to say, I feel strong enough to participate. I've lived here 20 years, over 20 years. I was just saying, I've lived in Canada longer than I've lived in Pakistan. This is truly home. And I don't want to participate, partly because it's boring shit, but partly because it is. Please do edit it out. But really, it's such boring politics. Partly it's boring, but partly it's got to do with the fact that I choose to have my political expression not just through the ballot, but also by working with communities, with young people, with ethno-racial communities, with organizing around various issues. But I have to be cognizant of the fact that when I go and work with the Tamil community, or when I go and work with the Pakistani community, I have to keep in mind all the other extraneous factors that may not be relevant to the Canadian political structure, but it is relevant to that individual and that community, and has a profound impact on their ability to participate. The other thing the reason I mention this is also that disenfranchisement doesn't just come because you cannot vote. Disenfranchisement also comes that if you cannot vote, politicians don't take you seriously. So I've had instances, where community, ethno-racial people living in a building, all these Somali and, Arab moms want something. But the city councillor couldn't be bothered because they're not homeowners and they're not voting population. So the constituents in the community that the city councillor is listening to, who may be against something that these people want, is very obvious. If you don't vote, if you're not a homeowner, politicians are not interested in what you do. And at the province and at the provincial and the federal level, every 4 years they come to get ethnic vote. But they know, if you cannot vote, they don't care. And you only become exotic around that 4-year term, right? Every time, 4 years come by, somebody's running for election, suddenly your ethnic vote counts. So now all the ethnics have to be rounded up and show their, ethnic little exotic colors. But the rest of the time, nobody gives a damn. The rest of the time, nobody cares. How the hell can political participation take place when people feel this disenfranchised? And this has happened, that when community people have gone, and particularly ethno-racial communities have felt that they cannot get their message across, that's when they have needed political participation and strategic partnerships with people like yourselves. Young people, planners, ethno-racial, social justice activists, to go in